There we go.
All right. So I thought I'd tell you my story with an emphasis on the things I did during grad school to get me to where I am now, thinking that might be most relevant for you. But at the end, there will be some Q&A, and you all can just ask me about anything. So I'm going to share just a photo with you. Well, this is always where it works really well when you practice. There it is. Can you see my photo?
Yes, we can see it.
This was me in grad school. My typical day was out in a cotton field. My PhD is in entomology, so I was in cotton fields counting the insects. To give you a little bit of context of how much things have changed for me. So as a grad student, and I'm guessing that part of why I was invited to do a career story is because I had sort of an unconventional career path. I noticed that I felt a little different as an entomologist in grad school. A lot of people who have an unconventional career path, their story is that they didn't really like research, or they really didn't like teaching, or they weren't really connecting with what they were studying. I really enjoyed it all. I loved research. I loved teaching. I didn't feel like I needed to abandon ship. But there were things like, I was the grad student in the department that could tell you what all the other grad students did as their research project. I was very interested in what everybody else was doing. I was always finding collaborators to work on my research with me. And my advisor would joke that I really liked having meetings. I got a free subscription to AAAS as a student. It was a promotional they were running at the time. And another grad student in my program would see me reading Science magazine and said, you know, Shannon, you're not going to have time to really keep up in your own discipline if you're, wasting time reading stuff like this. And so commence Moana soundtrack, Frozen 2 soundtrack. It was like, there must be something else out there for me, kind of revelation that was happening. And so I was on a bunch of listservs. I'm still on a bunch of listservs. And I don't remember which one emailed me one day about a job with the Union of Concerned Scientists. And it was for a PhD scientist, but the end job was working with policymakers and forming coalitions and strategizing and getting stakeholders together. And I thought, I almost felt embarrassed by having this feeling, but I felt like it was really me. I had never done anything remotely like that, but I really connected with it. And so I read down on the job description, and you had to have had a PhD plus 2 years of policy experience. And I thought, well, how would I get that? So I started researching and talking to people, and didn't take me long to stumble upon AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowships, which are designed exactly as an opportunity for someone who has gotten a PhD in any science-related discipline to go and spend a year in Washington, D.C., working in policy, either on Capitol Hill, in the White House, at an executive branch agency. There's a whole variety. You do that for a year, and a lot of people stay and keep working in policy. A lot go back to academia, and then some do something completely different. So I knew at that point that that was what I wanted to do. So I started watching their webinars, reading their career stories and things like that on the website. And it was clear to me that they wanted to see you having had a little bit of policy related experience coming in. But of course, on the webinars, their former fellows say, oh, not to worry, they'll count anything. If you did student government in high school, or if you've written a political blog, or if you've worked on a campaign, don't worry. I had done nothing remotely related to any of that. I had never, I come from a small town, I was agricultural entomologist. I'm not sure that at that point in my life, I had ever even been in the same large room as an elected official, even a city council member. That's how disconnected I was from that type of world. So I put together a 3-pronged strategy. I needed to start learning more about this. I needed to connect myself to this world. I needed to network, and I needed to find out how I could get some policy experience and fast. What I did have going for me is I had an EPA STAR fellowship, which gave me, among other things, a little bit of career development money that I could use for some travel. So I decided I was going to go to the AAAS branch meeting in Houston. I couldn't afford to go to the real AAAS, the big national AAAS meeting in DC. So I was going to go to the branch meeting and try and network and ask about these fellowships and how I could do something that counted as policy on a tight turnaround. Then I was going to go, I joined, for the student membership fee, I joined the Crop Science Society of America. You'll see if you check out AAAS Science and Technology Policy Fellowships on their website, they have partnering societies that give out some of these fellowships. Crop Science Society is one of them. So prong 2 of the strategy was go to Crop Science Society of America's annual meeting and network, right? Like I knew this word networking. I didn't, entomologist, didn't know the what, but I knew I just needed to be in places with the right people. Third prong of the strategy was for EPA STAR Fellows, there is an annual conference in Washington, DC, and they gave us an opportunity to create a poster on our research, and they were going to select, I think it was 30 of us, to present our work on Capitol Hill. Okay, so that 3-pronged strategy: go to AAAS branch meeting, go to Crop Science Society of America meeting, get selected to present my poster on Capitol Hill. Went to the AAAS branch meeting. Obvious to me now, but not obvious to me then, there was no AAAS fellowships table at the AAAS branch meeting in Houston, or at least if there was, I didn't find it. Probably should have splurged and gone to the one in DC if that's really what I was going for. So then there was the Crop Science Society of America meeting. They did have a table advertising their policy office and their fellowships. So I was able to afford to be there for 2 days. Day 1, every time I went in the ballroom, poster shows and stuff like that, there were always people around the table that they were already busy talking with. So I thought, okay, I'll wait till I have an opening. I lingered on my feet in that ballroom most of the day. They managed to always be away from their table or someone was chatting with them. And so I was like, okay, that's all right. Day 2, I'm going to get in there. I'm going to network. All right. Well, I had bought some professional shoes. Remember, from the Cotton Fields entomologist. Okay, I had bought some professional shoes that had like maybe inch and a half heel that I was wearing at this meeting. I didn't know to break in my shoes. So wake up on morning number 2, ready to get in there and network, put on these shoes, and like literally crying. It hurt so bad to even squeeze these shoes onto my feet. My blisters were so bad. So I didn't even go back to the conference on day 2. So right. Okay, fail 1, fail 2. It all rode on that poster. So I worked really, really hard on that poster. And I was selected to be one of the posters that they were going to present at this annual meeting. So getting very excited for this annual meeting, breaking in my shoes this time. Everyone in my life trying to be helpful, but like me, not knowing anything about how one would go work in policy. My dad said, oh, you ought to write your member of Congress and tell them to come meet you and see your poster at this reception on Capitol Hill. Sure, that sounds like a fantastic idea, networking. So I emailed there, and I lived in Tucson. Obviously, you only have one member of Congress serving your house, but I wrote both of them and invited them to attend my reception. All right, so go to this reception on Capitol Hill. I thought Capitol Hill meant Capitol building. Capitol Hill is a rather big place. It was definitely like at the edge of Capitol Hill. It was definitely in a basement. I think there was only one actual congressional staffer that I interacted with at my poster. It was mostly people who were there with the EPA conference. But I was like, okay, check. Talked to a policymaker when presenting my research on Capitol Hill. If anything, that is a good soundbite. Came back to Tucson from the conference, and Congresswoman Gabrielle Gifford's staff had written me back, and they had said, we're so sorry that the Congresswoman can't come to your poster show on Capitol Hill, but it's just something nice. Let us know if we can ever do anything, something like that. So I wrote back. This is the part that's a little bit embarrassing now, but you know, sometimes you just got to go through that door. I wrote back and said, oh no, that's totally okay. But if the Congresswoman could ever use any help on any insect related issues, I am an entomologist and would love to help. So, her staff member, who is my friend to this day, very classy lady, wrote back and said something delightful like, well, we don't work on insect related issues most days, but we do have this congressional internship program if you would be interested in, you know, serving our office in some way. So, and now I know that, you know, if you're a grad student and you're interested in something like that, you have a leg up, you know, I think usually on the other competition. So I was able actually to negotiate. I was able to negotiate the hours down to 10 hours a week so I could still do my research and TAing. And I was able to negotiate also for, I did spend 95% of that. So this was in their district office. So I was in town where school was, spent 95% of my time doing what all the interns did, answer mail, answer the phones and things like that. But I was able to negotiate for a little special project, helping their solar energy coordinator with some outreach events. So then another soundbite, I was able to say I worked on science policy. So meanwhile, another listserv, no. Meanwhile, my department chair in entomology circulates an email saying that the U of A Federal Relations Office, I didn't know that they had a Federal Relations Office. We also have, so now that you know, at UTSA, we have a government relations office. Reached out, and they were actually putting on an info session for AAAS fellowships. By the time it was forwarded to me, it had already occurred, but I was desperate at this point. My three-pronged strategy had mixed results. I was at least finally getting a little bit of policy experience, but I still felt a little bit lost. Reached out, and actually their associate vice president for federal relations, who later became my boss post-fellowship, reached out to me, said, you know what, I'm always willing to buy a cup of coffee for any grad student who wants to go to DC and represent the U of A well. And I extend that offer to you all as well. I'm always willing to buy a cup of coffee for a UTSA grad student who wants to learn about, you know, how they can go to DC and work in policy. And so then I had a mentor, and then I had a coach. And so then I knew what I was doing. With that kind of info in hand, I went ahead and I reached out to the policy director from the Crop Science Society of America. We had a phone call where I was able to learn more about their fellowships. And I asked him if there was anything I could do to become more involved in policy with that society. And he said, well, as a matter of fact, at our upcoming annual meeting, I had one more annual meeting before my application was due. He said, we're actually going to put on a policy banquet for the grad students. Would you like to help co-organize it? I was like, yes. So I helped co-organize that policy banquet. And at that policy banquet, I was able to connect with one of their former fellows from their society who had worked for Russ Feingold on Capitol Hill. And then I really had a coach. Then I really knew what I needed to do to be successful in getting one of those fellowships. So I did. I got a fellowship. I went to DC. You might be wondering what you do in that type of experience. Let me just share some photos. So this is, oops. This is me on top of the Capitol Dome. A member of Congress can accompany you and take you on a tour where you climb up and go on the outside of the Capitol Dome. That's my husband, Jed, on the left. The senator took some of his staff. You can see two more of his staff members in between my husband and I there. And you can see the fallen snow there on the Capitol Mall. And here I am, kind of making a funny face, but staffing the senator is what you call it, at a hearing he had for the Environment and Public Works Committee. I served as his advisor on a suite of science-related issues for that year. I was his advisor on agriculture, fisheries, natural disasters. My portfolio sort of grew with time. It's funny going from the sciences to this type of experience because you go, wait, I am only you know, I am only an expert on Lepidopterous cotton pests. I couldn't speak to, you know, grasshoppers, much less could I as an entomologist apply that scientific understanding to fisheries, but you can, you know, the training you get in grad school in critical thinking and hypothesis-driven research really is broadly valuable in society in a lot of ways. So anyway, you know, with this example, when you staff the senator at the hearing, you research what all will be talked about at the hearing. You draft them intro statements and questions, and then you sit behind them. And then when they're not on camera, they're often turned around in their chair, asking you questions, preparing for their next remarks. And that's a Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee. You might wonder why I was at a Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee. I'll tell you, because I had natural disasters in my portfolio and they were working on flood insurance. So life's twists and turns. I spent a lot of that year, most of what I did, I met with stakeholders. I worked to draft and advance federal legislation, ranging from being a part of large bills that, you know, tons of offices were working on together to smaller things that we were just advancing. So it was pretty much the best year ever for me. Less so for my husband. So he hated the weather. And, you know, I had gotten him, I'd convinced him to move to Arizona for grad school. I had convinced him to move to DC. He hated the weather, and it was just his turn. So we moved back to Tucson, where I ended up becoming my alma mater, the University of Arizona's Director for Federal Legislative Affairs. Fancy way of saying I was a lobbyist. I am in this system as a past registered federal lobbyist. Working with the university to advance legislation favorable to advancing education, research, and the other missions of higher education. That's how I got into higher ed administration. I later pivoted over to working in the Office of Research at the University of Arizona for Dr. Kimberly Andrews Espy, who's now our provost here at UTSA. That's sort of how those dots connect. And now I'm in academic affairs as the Assistant Vice Provost for Academic Initiatives. And what I do in that role is I manage processes related to some of our big institution level initiatives that involve gathering a lot of different people together, working with external relations, working with development, working with the president's office, working with the deans and the faculty, managing task force processes, and getting the right outreach to happen internally and externally into the community, and the right milestones to happen to really have inclusive, collaborative leadership resulting in institutional changes that ultimately benefit our students and our community. One of those was managing the process that led to the creation of our new College for Health, Community, and Policy. Debbie Howard-Rappaport on the phone was a big part working together with me on that. That was an academic initiative. Right now, Debbie and I are working very hard on the Integrated Design Initiative, which you can read about on our initiative's website, and also the tactical. We're working closely with the tactical teams that are helping with our planning for how campus will reopen in the fall. So anyway, that was a mouthful. I guess with that, I just want to open it up to any questions you have. I know that Tracy is going to stop recording.
Yes. So thank you for your story. And now I'm going to stop recording, but I'm not going to end the meeting.
Okay.
So